Today, I want to talk about throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And for those who are unfamiliar with this saying, according to Wikipedia, it is an idiomatic expression for an avoidable error in which something good is eliminated when trying to get rid of something bad. Or, in other words, rejecting the favorable along with the unfavorable. And I've been seeing this mentality lately amongst people who I'm going to refer to as vaccine contrarians. People like Tim Pool, who a few days ago tweeted, "What was the point of the vaccine?" Earlier that day, he tweeted, "If the vaccine does not help stop the spread of the virus, what's the point of the vaccines? A preemptive therapeutic?" A few days after that, Tim Pool tweeted, "Someone I know who is triple vaxxed just got COVID. What the fuck is the point of the vaccine?" And then a little later or earlier in the day, he had some mocking tweet saying, "Early 2021, vaccines prevent the disease and will stop COVID. End of 2021. Vaccines are a preemptive therapeutic treatment." And I noticed Michael Knowles has been on this bandwagon. Back on January 10th, he tweeted, "It would have been worse without the vaccine is a cope," according to Knowles, "is a cope for people who thought the vaccines were going to do what we were all told they would and prevent infection." Going on to say, "Sure, maybe the vaccines help to reduce the severity of the virus. Yeah, no big deal or anything. But let's remember, we only believe that to be true because we heard it from the same deceitful idiots who misled us about virtually every other aspect of this virus for the last 2 years." And I find this interesting because when looking into this, I found clips of both Tim Pool and Michael Knowles paying lip service to the vaccine. Tim Pool at one point back in November said, "Yeah, I think the vaccine is great. He just opposed the vaccine mandates." So it's hard to tell if they're suddenly changing their mind on this issue, or if they're just trolling, or if they're just looking for a reason to own the libs, and in doing so, they're undermining the usefulness of the vaccine. Or as some may say, they are throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And of course, it's not just these two. Clueless Candace Owens has been on an anti-vax crusade for a long time now, as you can see. Recently, she got annoyed that former President Donald Trump was praising the vaccines. So there's a lot of this vaccine contrarianism because, Michael Knowles also mentioned, he also tweeted, Biden, Fauci, and Walensky all said the vaccines would prevent infection and transmission. So I guess we're only supposed to get our information from the president and government bureaucrats. So as you can see, a lot of this vaccine contrarianism seems to be happening because left-leaning politicians, government experts, and people in the media may have overhyped the vaccine's effectiveness. You could say they exaggerated the effectiveness of the vaccine, which is bad. When you lie about important shit like this, you sort of ruin your integrity and give people a good reason to stop trusting you. So people who exaggerated the effectiveness of the vaccine, they should be ridiculed. But contrarians like Michael Knowles and Tim Pool and clueless Candace Owens, they act like nobody was honest about how the vaccines work. And I remember first finding out about how vaccines work from this video that was put up by Dr. Ron Swanda back in December 8th of 2020. This predates the FDA's emergency use authorization, and he explains in a 2.5-minute video how the vaccines work.
So, if we are newly infected with coronavirus, The antibodies that we've now produced are going to bind with the antigen present on the outside of the COVID-19 and direct the coronavirus for destruction by macrophages.
So there you go. From what, you can watch this whole video, but I think this clip kind of says it. He doesn't say that it prevents you from getting COVID or prevents transmission, but mostly that introducing this spike protein alerts your immune system to create antibodies to fight the infection for when you do get it. Sounds pretty cool if you ask me.
Well done.
I feel like the point to really drive this point home, in fact, I remember Family Guy also had a similar explanation on how the vaccine works. And I feel like the time to really drive this point home was last May when Bill Maher, I think he was the first high-profile case of COVID after infection. I remember at the time, a lot of anti-vax dipshits were spiking the football, saying, oh, what now? I heard these vaccines, they prevented you from getting COVID. Bill Maher was vaccinated, still got COVID, so do the vaccines work? But then when you see what Bill Maher said, when he tweeted stuff like, thanks to all wishing me to get well, hard to do since I am perfectly fine, but I appreciate it. It was reported that he tested positive, but that he wasn't really showing severe symptoms. So I took this as an instance of the COVID vaccine actually working, doing what it was designed to do. But apparently that's not good enough for many people like Tim Pool and Michael Knowles and Candace Owens. And yeah, Democrats do bear some responsibility for shitty messaging on vaccines, especially when they insist that people still mask up, wrap cloth around their mouths. That sends the message that they don't think the vaccine is good enough at protecting people from COVID. I experience it here living in Los Angeles. There is a county-wide vaccine mandate and mask mandate. And so now if I want to go to a bar or a concert, I have to show proof of vaccine at the door, whatever. But then as soon as I get in, they make me wrap cloth around my mouth. And I'm like, why? Why? I'm vaccinated. I'm boosted. Do I look like I'm scared of COVID? COVID ain't got shit on me because I'm vaxxed, and so if I get infected with COVID, my immune system is just going to smack the shit out of it. Of course, people like Michael Knowles and Tim Pool and Candace Owens, they could have easily explained how the vaccine works to their respective large audiences. I mean, even Lex Friedman had an expert on his show to explain how mRNA technology works. What's stopping the Tim Pools, the Michael Knowles, and the Candace Owens of the world from inviting this guy, Vincent Racaniello, or Ron Swanda, or Dr. Amesha Delja? What's stopping these vaccine contrarians from inviting experts on their show to explain how mRNA technology works?
Not a goddamn thing.
But I guess only politicians like the president and the mainstream media should be expected to do that heavy lifting, because people like Michael Knowles, they have more important shit to talk about, like woke television commercials. Or in the case of Tim Pool, I watched some of his recent shows. He still dedicates time on his live streams to complain and bitch and moan about how the media is unfair to former President Donald Trump. It's January 2022. Now, in this video, I'm not going to focus on debunking the vaccine contrarians. There's already no shortage of people already doing that, explaining how if you get vaccinated, you're like 11 times less likely to get hospitalized or whatever. And I suspect that most people already have their mind made up on the issue. Instead, I want to talk about the sky-high upside of mRNA technology that was used for these vaccines. Because I think that time, not the magazine, but actual time, is going to make these vaccine contrarians look like monumental goofballs. I think in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, people are going to look back at all of these vaccine skeptics and contrarians and laugh at how boneheaded some of these hot takes were. President Biden said it would prevent infection, and all it does is reduce symptoms and risk of hospitalization. I think this would be like being unimpressed. This would be like being unimpressed with Kobe Bryant's NBA career because a handful of sports journalists hyped him up as being the next Michael Jordan, and then saying shit like, oh, all Kobe Bryant did was, all he did was win 5 NBA championships, and 3 of those were because he had Shaquille O'Neal on his team.
Well, excuse me, princess.
So let's take a look at a few articles about mRNA technology. This is a story, an article from the Wall Street Journal titled The Vast Promise of mRNA Technology. It's from December 3rd of 2021. But the article says, BioNTech is working on self-amplifying mRNA that can produce large amounts of protein from a small amount of mRNA. This could enormously improve manufacturing efficiency, effectively moving more mRNA production from the lab into human cells, and the efficacy of future vaccines and treatments. In 2018, BioNTech paired with Pfizer to develop a flu vaccine. With conventional flu shots, viruses are injected in fertilized chicken eggs. I actually did not know this before reading this article. It turns out that, before mRNA technology, vaccines had to be developed with chicken eggs. A CNN article confirms this, says the U.S. keeps millions of chickens in secret farms to make flu vaccines, but their eggs won't work for coronavirus. That was from March of 2020. And according to this article, this is a reason why flu vaccines are only 50% effective at preventing illness on average. Goes on to say an mRNA flu vaccine could improve that efficacy by better matching the strains in circulation. And mRNA generates a stronger immune response than the inactivated viruses. Pfizer and BioNTech started a flu vaccine trial in September, and Moderna launched one in July. Moderna is also advancing vaccines for other infectious diseases, including Zika, HIV, Epstein-Barr, CMV, human metapneumovirus, parainfluenza virus, and respiratory syncytial virus. The last 3 are respiratory viruses that can cause severe illness in children. What about the children, folks? And people over 65. Moderna aims to combine vaccines for seasonal flu, RSV, and COVID-19 into a single shot. Before the pandemic, Moderna and BioNTech were each working on using mRNA for therapeutic purposes. Oh my God, it's just therapeutic, you guys. Moderna paired with AstraZeneca on an mRNA therapy to regenerate heart tissue in patients with heart failure. Their mRNA encodes a protein called vascular endothelial growth factor A, which promotes new blood vessel growth. A phase 1 trial completed in early 2019 showed the mRNA, after being injected into the skin of men, caused a localized production of protein without severe side effects. Last month, they reported a positive early results from phase 2 trial. As Mr. Rossi recognized a decade ago, mRNA also offers the potential to reprogram cells, saying, quote, "We have shown that mRNA can be used to take a blood cell and generate a stem cell. This opens up the potential to address various diseases, including aging and tissue repair," unquote. Future mRNA uses could include stimulating the production of cartilage to ease arthritis and collagen to reduce wrinkles. Autoimmune diseases, which the immune system attacks part of the body, are another promising area of research. BioNTech this year published a study that showed an mRNA vaccine has the potential to treat multiple sclerosis without suppressing the immune system like existing therapies do. BioNTech's main focus is cancer. It has 21 mRNA products in its clinical pipeline that uses 11 different approaches to killing cancer cells. One of Miss Carrico's first projects at BioNTech involved injecting mRNA coding for cytokines, proteins that control the immune response, into the surface of a tumor. That makes the cold tumor hot so that immune cells migrate there so they can see the metastatic tumor there and kill it. Another approach is cancer immunotherapy personalized for the patient. Dr. Sain explains how it works. After taking a biopsy, quote, we can identify the mutations to select those mutations that are best suited to detect the patient's tumor, and then we prepare mRNA for the patient. That is something we can do in less than 6 weeks. We also have other articles from sources like NBC News that say, could mRNA vaccines be the next frontier of cancer treatment? A clinical trial is enrolling colorectal cancer patients to see whether or not personalized mRNA vaccine can prevent their cancer from coming back. This is really cool stuff. Talks about how BioNTech chose to target colorectal cancer for a potential vaccine because of the disease's relatively high rate of relapse. Colorectal cancer has been on the rise among people younger than 65 for the past decade, according to the CDC. And a study led by the American Cancer Society estimated that people born in 1990 have double the risk of developing colorectal cancer in their lifetimes compared to people born around 1950, when the risk was at its lowest. With current treatments, about 30 to 40% of patients diagnosed with colorectal cancer will have a relapse about 2 or 3 years after surgery that's caused by stray cancer cells that have moved elsewhere in the body. Quote, the question is, if we add a vaccine, can we prevent these relapses? We believe the vaccine could be in a position to do that, unquote. The novel vaccine uses proteins unique to the people's tumor to train their immune system to recognize the cancer cells and then fight and hopefully kill the cells. Instead of using more traditional chemotherapy, it is now trying to get the body's own immune system to fight the cancer, said Dr. Scott Kopitz, who is a professor of medical oncology at the University of Texas at their cancer center. We also have a story from the BBC from November 22nd of 2021, asking, could mRNA make us superhuman? This is another long article, but it talks about how solutions for tropical diseases are being explored. Moderna are close to phase 2 out of 3 in clinical mRNA vaccine trials for both Zika and chikungunya. Both are described as neglected, so-called because they affect the poorest populations of the world and do not receive adequate research and funding. The speed and cost of mRNA vaccines could change that paradigm and signal the end of neglected tropical diseases. Story goes on to talk about if treatments for cancer, HIV, and tropical diseases are coming along with mRNA 2.0, then what could have been further down the line with 3.0? One huge area of concern for modern medicine is antibiotic resistance. Potentially, you could envision actually making a vaccine against a bacterial antigen or some of those really tricky to treat bacteria, says Blanky. There are no trials yet, but scientific journals such as Frontier have explored this idea. Going on to ask, all of this raises the question, could mRNA therapeutics, it's just therapeutic, you guys, Could they give us almost superhuman immunity? Guys, this sounds like some Captain America superhuman serum shit we're talking about. Then there was a story put out on December 9th of 2021 by the NIH talking about how experimental mRNA HIV vaccine shows safe promise in animals. Another story on USA Today talks about how technology used in mRNA COVID vaccines offers hope for treatment of millions with heart disease. Studies suggest. This is a story from January 6th of 2022, just a couple weeks ago. Talks about how the team delivered the treatment using mRNA technology, which has been proven over the last year with hundreds of millions of people receiving mRNA-based COVID vaccines. Quote, if it works in people, it really could have an enormous impact, Epstein said. Almost every type of heart disease is accompanied by fibrosis. About 50% of heart failure is directly caused by the scar tissue, which prevents the heart from relaxing and pumping effectively. Fibrosis is also involved in leading cause of lung and kidney disease. In a decade-old CART approach to fighting blood cancers developed at Penn by study co-author Carl June, immune cells from the patient are taken out of the body and genetically altered to identify tumor cells. Then they're reinserted so that they can destroy the cancer. The expert that Lex Friedman had on his show also touched upon this.
There's the term for this modified.
Right. So we're now using viruses at our bidding. We're using them as vectors, not just for vaccines. We can cure monogenic diseases. That is, if you're born with a genetic disease, you have a deletion or a mutation in a gene, a single gene, we can give you the regular gene back using a virus vector. But cancers too. We can cure cancers with vectors.
Wow.
Real Lex Friedman, he's blown away, and so am I. Now, I remember Dr. Amesh Adalja in one of his interviews with Yaron Brook. I could have swore I remember Amesh saying that people should think of mRNA technology as Reardon metal. And that's how amazing this technology is. Now, I'm having a hard time finding the clip. So if I'm misremembering, if I'm misapplying this quote, I apologize. But I guess either way, even if he didn't say, you know what, then I'll take credit for the comparison, folks.
You're goddamn right.
Because I think the comparison is valid. Now, for those who do not know what Reardon metal is, Reardon metal was this amazing piece of technology in the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. It's stronger than steel, cheaper than steel, and lasts longer than any other metal in existence. And one thing that Hank Reardon and Dagny Taggart have to deal with in the story of Atlas Shrugged is people in the media and politicians denouncing Reardon metal as unsafe because it's experimental, it's unproven, and we should really wait for experts in the government to study the metal and its long-term impacts before we do stuff like build railroads and bridges out of the metal. And then eventually, spoiler alert for anyone who's reading Atlas Shrugged, after the success of Reardon metal, after it is demonstrated to be safe and reliable, the government eventually forces Hank Reardon into giving up his intellectual property rights over Reardon metal. The government forces him into handing that intellectual property over to the state.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
So let's bring this to the real world with mRNA. A lot of vaccine contrarian dipshits are mad that the experimental mRNA technology was greenlit a little too fast by the FDA. They think that the FDA should have waited longer, should have taken a little more time, waited for more clinical trials. Wait until we know the long-term effects that this vaccine will have before we let it in on the market. And on a side note, I think this is an underrated, destructive aspect of the FDA's existence in that it has, its existence has, I think, conditioned the American populace, much of the American populace, into being immediately suspicious of anything that's not rubber stamped by government bureaucrats in Washington. So that when we have vaccines that are granted emergency use, many people immediately treat it with suspicion and start having cynical views on it. But coming back to the real world, so not only are a lot of people wanting government bureaucrats at the FDA to study the vaccines longer before we let it on the market. They don't trust it because it's experimental. Meanwhile, you have the president jibber-jabbering Joe Biden and his cheerleaders in the media. I think Seth Meyers was one of these people, demanding that the intellectual property of these vaccine developers be suspended.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
You know, I remember when Kyle Kalinske, one of the times he was on Joe Rogan, I remember they were talking about drug regulation, and it was amazing because in one breath, they both agreed that the war on drugs needs to come to an end, and I actually concur. We should not be having a war on drugs. But then literally a minute before that or a minute after that, they both agreed that of course, America needs an institution like the FDA to regulate medicinal drugs. So in other words, based on this logic, if someone has a potential life-saving medicine, suffer-alleviating medicine, they have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on clinical trials. We have to wait years, sometimes up to 10 years, and hope that a government bureaucrat gives the medicine the rubber stamp before it can enter the market, because we cannot rush potential life-saving medicine to the market. But if someone wants to smoke crack, who's the government to get involved in their business?
That's just not smart.
Anyway, I find this all amusing considering that Amesh Adalja is a fan of Ayn Rand. He even spoke at Ocon last summer, gave one hell of a talk. I recommend everyone check that out. And I find this amusing because recently a lot of Ayn Rand's haters tried to associate her, tried to lump her in with anti-vax dipshits after Aaron Rodgers bragged about how he had Atlas Shrugged on his bookshelf. You can see this blue check mark with about 9,000 followers say, hey, explains everything. It doesn't explain anything. So bringing it all back to the vaccine contrarians who are suddenly acting like they're too cool for school. What's the point of these vaccines anyway? All they do is reduce symptoms.
Well, excuse me, princess.
To outright, I'm not getting this vaccine because Big Pharma made it and the Democrats like it, or whatever stupid culture war landfill that these blockheads are choosing to die on. And you know what? I say, let's let this play out. Let's wait and see what Big Pharma does with the mRNA technology and how successful they are at using it to treat stuff, maybe prevent, maybe at the very least alleviate suffering from nasty shit like cancer, HIV, like malaria, Zika virus, influenza, multiple sclerosis, heart disease, fibrosis. I mean, if you guys really want to own the left, who, the left has been trying to destroy whatever little capitalism remains in the healthcare industry for the last few fucking decades. If you really want to own the left, I say the way to do it is to say, man, look at all this amazing stuff that Big Pharma is doing. Look at all this amazing stuff that these big greedy corporations are doing. Thank goodness that we still have a little freedom left in medicine, because a lot of lives are going to be saved, and these corporations would have done it a lot sooner if not for that pesky FDA. But no, the culture warriors would rather embrace the left's behavior of concocting bizarre conspiracy theories and hating on big business and big pharma. Woo! And they wonder why the left is winning on the whole capitalism versus socialism debate. Regardless, if people end up living longer lives, if people end up living better lives because of mRNA technology, then we can look back at all of these hot takes and just point and laugh at how ridiculous these knuckleheads were.